InDesign has long had the ability to add special effects to your page. We're going to do a few. We're going to stroke or outline type. We'll add transparency to make objects see-through. We'll take this text and apply a gradient to it. This will still be editable text with a gradient, a blend of color from light to dark. And we'll experiment with Photoshop-style blending modes. I'm going to start by selecting the word family at the top of this document. Now I use Type, Create Outlines to turn this from a font to a graphic. That way you guys don't need the font that I used, Arial Rounded, to be installed on your machine. At the top of my Tools panel, I'm going to hit these double arrows to go to a two-column toolbar. That way I can better see fill, or the inside color, and stroke, or the outline color. And I can click these double-sided arrows just above fill and stroke to the right to swap the fill and stroke. And when I do, my text gets clear on the inside, or none, and an outline around the edge. I then want to select this white box. You could tell you've got the white box because the fill color shows white. With this white box selected, I'll switch my workspace to the typography workspace. Up here in the upper right corner, in typography, I have the Effects panel. You can also get to that under Window and Effects. In the Effects panel, I'm going to set the opacity, or how solid this box is, to 70% by typing 70 and pressing Return or Enter. Or you could click the arrow to the right and slide it until you're happy with the value. I think I'll finish at about 60%. This way, you call attention to the text, but you could still see the photo through it. Now I'm ready to do a gradient. I'll select this text, but if I go back to my double column toolbar, switching our workspace switched back to the single vertical row. I clicked these double arrows to go back to the double column toolbar, and you could see that I have the option for a solid color, a gradient, or none. In fact, if I hit gradient now, it applies a gradient to the actual frame or container. So I'll undo that. And over on your toolbar, you have the option to set that the formatting you choose affects the container or frame, or the type inside the container. I'm going to click the T so that the formatting affects the text. And you'll see my fill color has changed to show a T. Now I'll click Apply Gradient, and I get a light to darker gradient. If I look at the Swatches panel, I've actually saved a grayscale gradient, which doesn't do 0 to 100%. It does shades of gray. If I double click it, I could see at this end I have a light rich gray, and at this end I have a rich black. So I've used two swatches that aren't quite black to white. On the toolbar, I can choose the Gradient Swatch tool. And with the Gradient Swatch tool, I'm going to zoom in with Command plus or Control plus to see this text closer, and I'll start at the top of the box and drag down. And this sets the light to the top of my text and the dark to the bottom. In fact, if I want to make sure it doesn't waver or get crooked, I can hold down my Shift key as I drag, and it makes sure it's a perfect linear blend. A very short drag just over the word bringing will fill the light to dark in just the text on the top. The longer you drag down, the more shades of gray you get. So you can keep resetting this over and over again by even starting much higher and dragging down here, or dragging much lower. I'm going to cover just a little bit into the top of the word baby, holding down my Shift key, and I want a little bit of the light color to show in the top of the letters. I've got it. Now, to see the photo in the background a bit better, I'll choose View, Display Performance, High Quality. That shows the actual Photoshop resolution, and you should see that this image got much sharper. I'll go back to my Effects panel on the right, and I want to add an effect. So I'm going to go to my Selection tool, click away, and click back on this text. In the Effects panel, you have blending modes, and one of the commonly used blending modes for drop shadows is Multiply. Multiply burns in the color of the photograph to the color of the text on top. You can especially see it here in the baby's ear. But experiment with these blending effects. I could try Screen, which lightens with the color. Ooh, I quite like that effect. I could try Overlay, which is making it look like a clear piece of acetate over top of the image. Soft Light, Hard Light, Color Dodge to lighten with the color, Color Burn to darken with the color. But I think my favorite for this one was Screen. Now I want to create an additional special effect that adds a drop shadow to this text to give it a little bit more depth. So under FX for Effects, I'll choose Drop Shadow. I'll move this up and away, and you'll notice because of my blending mode, it looks a bit like a glow. If I want this to look like an overall glow around, I could set the distance to 0 and hit Tab. As long as Preview is checked, you'll see that affecting the type all the way around. You can increase the size to make it softer or harder edge. You can make it thicker by increasing the spread around the characters. And you could play with offset, but in this case, distance and X and Y offset I'm leaving at 0. I could also make it darker by dialing up the opacity, but I'll leave that at 75%. And I'll click OK. And now I'll choose View, Fit Page in Window, click away, and go to Preview mode. Now I want just a little bit more depth here on the word family, so I'll select the word family and choose Drop Shadow again. I'll move this a little bit closer by adjusting the X and Y offset, or you can even type in values. I'll try 0.05 by 0.05, hitting Tab to see the changes. And I'll click OK and click away to deselect. And there I've used several effects: transparency, a drop shadow, a gradient with a blending mode in the effects panel, and a drop shadow that simulates a glow. And when I'm finished, I'll save my final result, but take some time to experiment with all the options that you have in effects, playing with opacity to adjust the transparency, and also note that you could do it to the object, the stroke or outline color, the fill, or the text, depending on what is selected.